Hello, and welcome to the ECR Retail Loss Sell More and Lose Less podcast series. My name is Colin Peacock. I've worked in the retail and FMCG business for more than 40 years, working on the dark side of retail on retail loss at every point in the supply chain. In this podcast, we're really just listening to what are some of the key learnings over the last sort of 18 to 24 months. Where should the retailers be thinking about acting to disrupt some of this bad behaviour, or perhaps nudge people towards good behaviour? They've worked with retailers, they've worked with and listened to consumers, and certainly had many focus groups, discussions with our working group on e-commerce loss. So I'll hand over to Michael and to Andrew and look forward to hearing what they've got to say.
Thanks, Colin. I'm really happy to be here. So I guess to sort of cut right to the chase, we think that there's three things that retailers can do right now to really take a bite out of returns fraud, and that's getting all their data lined up, having sort of a holistic view from ordering, fulfillment, and claims. Seems that there's lots of disparate, fragmented data in a lot of retailers. The second thing is kind of looking at their team members. The team members are in some ways their line of best defense. They are the most subjected to the bad actors who are using a lot of social engineering tactics. So that's really focusing on a lot of training, but also that there is some team member collusion with either bad actors or maybe associates, and that those people can really do you a lot of harm. We found it really difficult to study that last problem, the team member collusion. If I take a step back, so that's what we think that retailers should do, but how do we get to that point? We noticed that, and retailers have said this in some of our meetings, that payment fraud was a really big problem, but that seems to a lot of people have taken some really positive action against that, and they've noticed sort of a displacement by bad actors into the claims process. And so abusing policies, manipulating team members to get a financial advantage. And then talking to retailers, we found that there was lots and lots of different types, subtly different types of return fraud. So like there's the big ones like wardrobing people, everyone has probably heard of. It's the most sort of prevalent. It's mentioned in the academic literature more than any other type of return fraud, but there's did not arrive, where you simply claim that your package that was delivered, actually I never received it. And there's all the way to very complicated things like manipulating the return package. And so we started cataloging. It must be dozens of different types of return fraud, and had these sort of minute distinctions between them, and thought we were being really clever. And then I was looking at all the academic literature, talking to retailers, and Andrew was in charge of looking at some fraud communities that are on some social media sites or messaging sites. And I might let Andrew kind of tell me the time when he gave me this bad news that I felt kind of threatened to crater the whole research project. Andrew, do you want to tell us your bit of the project and kind of what your sort of major findings were?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so I suppose one of the key things that we were really keen on understanding with this rise of refund fraud or return fraud that retailers are facing is what's going on in digital environments. Like we'd heard anecdotally from retailers that there are people sitting there in TikTok videos sharing knowledge about these things, or guides and refunding tutorials being distributed between people in dark web communities and dark web markets. So when we were wanting to explore how many methods there are and how exactly some of these methods are developed, we ran into this problem where actors are actually sitting in these communities, constantly developing new iterations on new iterations of methods. So one particular method might have 12 different variations, and then someone would face a problem in executing that method. So then another community member would suggest another way around it. So it essentially creates an infinite number of variations of these methods. And that was just compounded by the fact that in some of these communities, I mean, there are cybercrime actors sitting there with live spreadsheets that they update depending on which method is working for which retailer. So yeah, that was this problem we ran into with trying to catalog a perfect clean number of methods.
Yeah, and I think your point, and it goes back to what you said at the beginning, Michael, about often these MOs, as I'm, on the dark web, relied on actually retailers not having joined up data. So they'd phone up customer service, or they'd phone up the store, or visit the store, and all the data was not joined up. So they're able to sort of find these holes, promotion periods, and various other things that could create the opportunities. That's kind of what you were looking at, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what Andrew made me realize is that even if we do catalog and get to whatever the number of return frauds that exist, actually retailers are going to change something, create sort of better experiences for customers, provide a new type of service, and that is going to create more vulnerabilities, because unfortunately the returns channel doesn't seem to have had the sort of investment and attention that maybe some other aspects of operations have. So sort of it seems to be like a fragmented system that's been underinvested in, and it's just sort of creating more vulnerabilities for bad actors to exploit.
We did some work with consumers as well. I think that was one thing that really jumped out. Just I guess the propensity of consumers, perhaps, or certainly the sample that you looked at, to perhaps claim for deliveries that did happen, but they claimed they didn't happen. I was quite shocked by some of those stats.
Yeah, so I guess before we get into that, the one thing to mention is that, so we spend a lot of this project talking about return fraud, but it's interesting that customers sometimes don't think that what they're doing is necessarily fraudulent. They think that they're aware that they're doing something a bit naughty, but they think if their understanding is, well, if retailers are are they going to give me a refund on just my word? Well, they're obviously happy with it. So in their minds, they don't see it that they're doing anything necessarily wrong. So there's a real tension there with sort of customer expectations and retailers' expectations. So for instance, the problem of wardrobing, there are many customers that don't have a problem with wardrobing. They don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're just renting something. Whereas for retailers, of course, they have to deal with all the restocking, the verification, the costs of receiving back the merchandise. So it's actually quite a costly endeavor for them. Anyway, so getting to customers, yes, we did do a fairly decent survey. It's about nearly 6,000 people across the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia, and asked. So these are people that have done online shopping or in-store shopping recently, and asked their experiences of the returns process and their understanding of what we call problematic return behaviours. So we outlined a number of scenarios like wardrobing, something called switch item return, bricking, did not arrive, and we described what they were in very objective clinical terms. We didn't sort of we didn't call it fraud, and just understood.
We focused more on the behaviour.
Yeah, that's right. And their awareness of it. Had they heard of this sort of behaviour? And if they had they ever engaged in it? And if they had, how often? And then we asked a lot of questions around their most recent experience doing it. How did they target the store? How did they select the retailer? Did they have any friction at all? Were they scrutinised at all? What did they do with the merchandise that they if they were allowed to keep the merchandise, what did they do with it? How did they learn about it? And it turns out, Colin, this might be quite alarming for retailers, is that they largely learn it through sort of word of mouth, or they sort of stumbled upon it themselves. I think a vast majority experienced absolutely no friction at all in the returns process, like not really. They received no pushback. And they often target retailers because of either the past experience or that it's well known that there's a liberal returns policy. So quite scary. The overview of that's quite scary. I guess in terms of the prevalence, wardrobing was the most prevalent of the return behaviours from our sample, and about 12% of people said that they, in the last 12 months, had engaged in wardrobing type behaviour. It really drops off quite considerably, but there is a strong relationship between the difficulty of each of the return behaviours and the prevalence. In other words, I mean, you're talking to Captain Obvious here, but the easier it is to do, the more of it that there is. And we see this in all sorts of different sorts of types of crime,
Yeah,
right?
no,
The more technical.
I was really struck by the did not arrive number. I mean, was that like...
Is it about 6%, I think?
6% was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like a very, very easy thing to do. You just don't answer the door. And then when they go away, you say, oh, it says it's arrived, but it hasn't. It's quite straightforward. Now, I think actually, talking to some of the retailers, they've really been able to combat that. So I think did not arrive is kind of probably diminishing. Like our stats are a snapshot. I think if we redid this, did not arrive might be a lot lower
I think it's a tension. It's a tension because, you know, if you want to be really certain, you probably, you know, as a retailer, you have to invest more in sort of photos and geolocation and maybe even not even leave the package on the doorstep. Our friend Ben Stickle does a whole lot of work around package theft, porch pirates.
Porch piracy, yeah. And again, we weren't able to focus on it a great deal, but you know, we had evidence, and Andrew found evidence that there are some of these bad actors have collude with some of the courier services. So that's quite, you know, for organised retail crime groups, that is a boon to have someone in a courier business.
Well, spoiler alert, I mean, something we're hopefully doing next year or future years is around grocery online delivery. And again, missing items in grocery deliveries, that seemed to be, again, another thing that people were, you know, again, some bad actors perhaps, or people, you know, perhaps finding it an easy touch to say, well, that Jack Daniels wasn't there, you know, in my order from Deliveroo or Just Eats or Uber Eats or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with that sort of rapid delivery format, like we looked at just, we didn't really specify anything, you know, like a format, but it seems to me that the rapid delivery format is even better for committing return fraud because retailers are breaking their neck to get items to people really quickly, and customers are able to kind of exploit that sort of the rapidness, you know, and then further that if you've got a third party involved, like a delivery platform, their returns policy might be even more liberal than a retailer's, you know. So it's that it seems to be an even harder problem than just straight return fraud.
Well, look, just in the spirit of Captain going on too long, tell me, you know, in terms of what retailers should be doing in terms of acting on, thinking about, you've done crime scripts, I think was really, really helpful. As you said, you can't get to a list of 2,000 different ways of doing it, but crime scripts, I think, is something you're recommending, joining up data. What are some of the sort of like really big things that if you're a retailer listening to this, go away and do this? Yeah.
So we outline in the report, which you should see in January 20th at all good ECR Loss websites. We recommend 3 things that you really need to get your house in order, and that's joined up data, as I mentioned before, having KPIs that are aligned. So having good sort of customer service KPIs is great, but you also need to sort of build in loss metrics as well, so that success is when loss is going in the right direction and customer service is going in the right direction. And that last thing is team training. Your team members are one of your best assets in this problem space. They are subjected to a whole host of social engineering, and they really need to be sort of supported with, you know, whether it's scripts to deal with these problematic, you know, the bad actors, and then the other piece is their potential, or the potential for them to be involved in any sort of collusion. Once you've got those 3 things in place, there's some tactics that you can think about for abuse that's different from fraud. Fraud is really about trying to identify these problematic customers, that's these repeat behaviours, and really trying to sort of identify them through data and exiting them out from your customer group. In terms of abuse, this is really, I think, a potential for education. These are ordinarily good customers or people that have the potential to be good customers, and it's really about sort of expressing some of the norms about what is sort of appropriate return behaviour. One of the things that the sort of people that are committing a lot of these sort of wardrobing is that they're really interested in the environment, sort of more broadly. And I think a lot of customers aren't aware of the environmental impact of these problematic return behaviours. So those are the sorts of things, less so the damage it does to the retailer. It seems that some of these people don't really care if it's impacting the retailer, but they probably care about impacting the environment.
Very good. Do you want to say anything else, Andrew, before we close the podcast?
Just on the other thing was the data that we found about how customers felt about getting charged a return fee and how much that would change their likelihood of engaging in return fraud. I thought that was a really interesting implication for retailers to consider. Probably an unpopular option for most customers, I imagine, though.
Well, to your point, though, I mean, I think that the number one was just being contacted by the retailer to sort of say, well, we notice you're returning an awful lot, or, you're always claiming the goods are not being delivered. Is there something we could do? That seemed to be a movie, taking the organisation and making it a person, and someone calling up and contacting them. I think they called out that would be a huge deterrent. Guys, this was terrific work, and I think groundbreaking. I think we've, as an industry, it's very hard to get a feel to how big this problem is, but I think you've really put some markers out there in terms of how big the problem can be based off the consumer research, but also all the work you've done on the web, on the dark web. So we really appreciate that. We're looking forward to this being received, this body of work being received really well. We're looking forward also to seeing how retailers can act and come back and tell us how they worked on crime scripts or how they joined up their data. So we have some success stories and can prove the impact of all your good work. So we really appreciate that. We're looking forward to the next projects and our continued partnership going forward.
Yes, no worries. Thank you, Colin. And yeah,
Thanks,
we're
Colin.
super excited to get this out in the hands of the retailers too.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Cheerio.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to all the ECR Retail Loss community for the sharing of their knowledge, their research and latest learnings that ensure that we become truly a global platform for learning. My name is Colin Peacock. This is the Sell More and Lose Less podcast, and if you liked it, please subscribe so you automatically get all future episodes. And also, if you think your colleagues and friends might also like it, please ask them to follow ECR Retail Loss on LinkedIn and tune in to our next podcasts. If you didn't like it, then let us know and we'll try and fix it. Either way, see you next time. Thank you again.